Corner. You gonna order, or did you just come in here to stare at me? Emma called out from behind the counter, not even looking up from the espresso machine she was wiping down, a half smile already pulling at the corner of her mouth. Daniel froze on the sidewalk outside the window, like someone had pressed pause on him. He was still in his work clothes, tie loosened, even though it was barely 6:30 in the evening, hands buried in the pockets of his gray slacks. Me? He asked, pointing at his own chest and glancing sideways like he was checking if there was another Daniel somewhere nearby she might be talking to. You, Emma said, crossing her arms on top of the counter. The guy in the blue tie who's been standing out there for about 15 minutes? From a corner table, an older man named Walter, who had been nursing his black coffee and reading his newspaper since the place opened that morning, let out a short laugh without lifting his eyes off the sports section. "She's got you, son," Walter said to no one in particular. "You know him, Walter?" Emma asked, genuinely surprised. "The whole block knows him," Walter said, turning the page. "Been doing this same thing for months now." Stands out there, looks at the menu board like he's never seen a chalkboard before, and then walks away. Daniel turned a shade of red that matched the cranberry muffins Emma had baked that morning. "That's not entirely accurate," he said, though his voice carried zero conviction. "No." Emma raised one eyebrow. "Then tell me what's on the menu. Prove you've been reading it." Daniel looked at the chalkboard sign propped in the window, the one with the hand-lettered specials that faded a little more every week from the afternoon sun, and went completely blank. "Coffee," he said finally. "There's coffee." "Gold Star," Emma said, slow clapping once with polite sarcasm. "What else, if you're feeling adventurous?" He squinted. "Pastries. And something below that I can't quite read from here." "House-made cinnamon rolls," Emma said without needing to check. "Best thing we make. Though, to actually try one, a person would need to come through the door. We don't do curbside service for people hovering on the sidewalk." "Not even if I asked really nicely?" Daniel asked, a small smile appearing despite himself. "Not even then," she confirmed. "Rules of the coffee shop are the rules of the coffee shop." At the table by the far window, two women in their 40s who had been pretending to work on their laptops were now openly watching the whole thing unfold. Daniel glanced around, realizing for the first time that Emma was not the only audience he had. "I feel like I'm interrupting something," he said, taking half a step backward. "You'd be interrupting if you left again without coming through that door," Emma said quickly, before he could get any real momentum going in the wrong direction. "That's the only thing that would count as an interruption right now." Walter folded his newspaper and set it on the table with finality. "She's got the right idea, kid," he said. "Walk through the door before she comes out there and brings the coffee to you on the sidewalk in front of everybody." "Would you actually do that?" Daniel asked, half laughing now, despite the nerves. "I'd do it in a heartbeat," Emma said. "Set a little folding table right there on the concrete. Serve you in front of everyone walking by. Your call." "Okay," Daniel said. "Definitely not that." From the corner table, a woman named Ruth, who was there every single Thursday with her canvas tote bag and reading glasses perched on her head, decided to weigh in even though nobody had asked her to. "I've been coming to this coffee shop for 12 years, Ruth announced, "and I have never in my life seen this much drama over a cup of coffee. Come inside already, young man. You're burning daylight." "I don't have any particular place to be," Daniel said, getting redder by the second. "Even worse," Ruth said. "Then you have absolutely no excuse." She picked up her mug and went back to her book, like she had just delivered a closing argument and court was adjourned. "See," Emma said, gesturing toward Ruth like she was presenting evidence. "Ruth never takes anybody's side. She's been neutral in every neighborhood disagreement since 2011. "It's true I don't," Ruth said without looking up. Daniel looked around the coffee shop at Walter and Ruth and the two women by the window, all of them watching him with barely concealed amusement. "Is the whole street betting on me?" he asked with a smile he could no longer quite keep off his face. "The whole block has been following along for months," Walter confirmed, still not looking up from where his newspaper now sat closed in front of him. "I had money on October." "You actually bet on this?" Daniel pressed a hand to his forehead somewhere between laughter and mortification. How much? $20, Walter said, which I already lost because it's September. Ruth had August, so she's out too. I chose August, Ruth confirmed, turning a page. Poor judgment on my part. Okay, Emma said, stepping back toward the door, changing angles. Here's the situation. You can come in or you can stay out there and let the entire neighborhood keep running commentary on your personal life. It's genuinely your choice. Daniel took one step toward the door, and then in a move that made Emma hold her breath without entirely meaning to, he stopped and stepped back again. I just realized, he said, staring at a point somewhere above the door handle, that now that I actually have to go in, I have no idea what I'm going to say once I'm inside. You don't have to say anything specific, Emma said, and for the first time her voice lost its teasing edge entirely. You just have to sit down and let me bring you coffee. The rest figures itself out. And if I say something stupid, you'll probably say several stupid things, Emma told him without sugarcoating it. So will I. That's how first conversations go. Nobody comes out of them looking completely put together, but nobody actually dies either. Walter looked up from across the room. Son, he said quietly, you've been standing out there for 3 months. A little awkward conversation isn't going to be the worst thing that happens to you today. Daniel stood there for another long moment, staring at the glass door with the hand-painted letters that said, the corner cup painted in blue that had started to chip at the edges, like the door was heavier than any door had a right to be. Emma watched him hesitate, and for the first time in all the weeks she had noticed him out there week after week, she felt something tighten in her chest. A mix of tenderness and impatience she could no longer keep entirely to herself. What's your name? She asked, switching tactics. Daniel, he said. Daniel Shaw. I'm Emma, she said. And I've been watching you stand out there for 3 months, Daniel Shaw, so statistically speaking, today is the day. 3 months, he repeated, genuinely surprised she had been keeping count. 3 months in running, Emma said. At this rate, we might make it to a full year. That was what finally did it. Daniel took a breath, the kind someone takes before something that feels bigger than the actual task at hand, and pushed the door open. The little bell above the frame rang out bright and clear, the same bell Emma had heard hundreds of times, without it ever mattering much at all. Welcome to the corner cup, she said, and her smile this time had no trace of mockery in it. Just something quieter and more genuine than she had planned on letting show. Finally, Daniel said, still holding the door handle like he was not completely sure his legs were going to keep cooperating. Sit anywhere you like, Emma said, except the sidewalk. You've used up your sidewalk privileges. He laughed a real one this time and walked to the table closest to the window, the same one he had probably been staring at from outside for the better part of 3 months. Why that table? Emma asked, following him with her order pad. Because from here you can see the sidewalk, Daniel said, pulling out the chair. I wanted to see what it looked like from this side. And it looked pretty ridiculous, he admitted. But I'm in now, so I suppose it doesn't matter anymore. You're in? Emma confirmed, and the way she said it carried about twice the weight of the words themselves. Walter raised his coffee cup across the room in a small salute. Well done, he said. Took long enough, but well done. Did everyone really talk about this? Daniel asked, still slightly disbelieving. Everyone, Ruth confirmed, without any diplomatic softening. The woman who runs the dry cleaners 2 doors down asked me about you last week. Small neighborhoods have long memories, even when they're inside a big city. Fantastic, Daniel said, dropping his head into his hands. The whole street knows about my love life. Welcome to the neighborhood, Emma said. You should just go ahead and get comfortable with it because at this rate, you'll be hearing about this sidewalk story for a long time. As long as you keep serving me coffee, Daniel said, I think I can handle it. Emma disappeared behind the counter for less than a minute and came back with a mug that she set in front of him before he had ordered a single thing. I didn't order yet, he said, looking at the cup. You didn't need to, Emma said. It's the house cinnamon roll coffee. brown sugar, a little vanilla pinch of cardamom. The specialty. I had it ready before you walked in. Before I walked in, you've been waiting 15 minutes. Since I saw you turn the corner at the end of the block, she said, and then paused like she was deciding how much more to say. I've been putting this on the back burner every time you showed up out there, just in case. For 3 months? Emma confirmed with a small shrug and a smile that she did not quite manage to keep casual. I lost count of how many times I made it and poured it down the drain. Apologies to my coffee budget. I'm sorry, Daniel said, and he meant it. Don't be, she said. Today it didn't go to waste. He took a sip, and something in his face settled, the way a person looks when something turns out to be exactly as good as they hoped it would be. This is incredible, he said. It's my grandmother's recipe, Emma told him. She opened this place almost 25 years ago. I just kept the formula and the hours. You run it by yourself? Mostly. My grandmother helps when she can, but her knees aren't what they used to be. Most days, it's just me and the counter and the sign that says open. That sounds like a lot. It is, Emma said, but it's my a lot, and I like it, even on the days when I get distracted watching indecisive men pace the sidewalk outside. Daniel smiled more easily now, the stiffness from outside giving way to something closer to actual curiosity. Can I ask you something? He said. You've asked me 4 things already, Emma said, but go ahead. Why today? I mean, I've been going by for months, and you never said anything before. Why did you decide to say something today? Emma leaned against the back of the empty chair across from him, taking the question more seriously than her earlier banter might have suggested she would. Because today I got tired of waiting, she said honestly. I've been watching you come by every evening, same time, same expression, like you are working through a very complicated math problem. And today I thought, either he walks through that door today, or I am going to spend the rest of my working life brewing coffee for a man who never actually drinks it. So you got fed up, Daniel said. A little, she admitted. And also I thought, if he's not going to do something about it, somebody has to. And it clearly wasn't going to be you. Fair, said Daniel. Completely fair. A new customer came in just then, the bell above the door announcing them, and Emma had to excuse herself for a few minutes. When she came back, she found Daniel looking out the window at the sidewalk he had spent so many evenings standing on. Everything okay? She asked. It looks different from in here, he said. The sidewalk. From out there, it always felt like the safest place in the world. From here, I can't figure out why I was so scared of a door. Fear almost never makes sense, Emma said, sitting down in the chair across from him for a moment, something she never did with customers. It just has stubbornness. Are you ever scared of anything? He asked. Emma was quiet for a second, the order pad pressed against her chest. I'm scared that someone will look and look and look, she said more honestly than she had intended, and never actually stay. I've watched a lot of people press their noses to that window and keep walking. You at least stood there. That counts for something. I'm not planning on walking past, Daniel said with a seriousness that surprised her. That's easy to say when the coffee's still hot, Emma replied, though something in her voice wanted to believe him. I'll still be saying it when it goes cold, he said. She did not have an answer for that, so she changed the subject. Where are you from originally? She asked. You've got a little something in your voice I can't quite place. Ohio, he said. Columbus. Moved out here about 4 years ago for work. You like it here? I like it more than I did 3 months ago, he said, and looked at her just long enough that the comment landed exactly where he meant it to. She stood up because she had tables to check on, but she noticed on the way back to the counter that she was smiling in a way she had not planned on. Daniel came back the next day and the day after that, and by the end of that first week he had a regular table. The one by the window. Emma stopped asking what he wanted, because she already knew, and she had his order ready before he finished walking through the door. You're going to have to start paying rent on that chair, she told him one evening as he settled into it with the ease of someone who already knew where the sun hit the table in the late afternoon. Name your price, he said. Tell me something new every time you come in, she said, setting his mug down. Something I didn't know before. That's the deal. Something new every day, he said. That's a high bar. Life's a high bar, she said. Surprise me. Okay, he said, thinking for a moment. If I hadn't ended up in insurance, I'd have been a furniture maker. My grandfather had a shop back in Ohio, and I spent most of my summers there sanding things down, watching pieces of wood turn into chairs and tables and little wooden toys. I still have a step stool I made when I was 13. One leg is a little shorter than the others, but I've never gotten rid of it. Why didn't you go that direction? Emma asked. My dad thought I should study something practical, Daniel said, making air quotes. So I got a business degree and ended up calculating risk assessments for other people instead of building things with my hands. That's a little sad, Emma said plainly. A little, he agreed. Though I still have the step stool to remind me there was a version of me who knew how to make something. Did you always want to run a coffee shop? He asked. I never thought about it in those terms, Emma said. I basically grew up in this place. My grandmother used to bring me here when I was 5 while my mom worked. By the time I was old enough to decide what I wanted to do with my life, I was already part of the furniture. It wasn't really a decision, it was more like an inheritance I chose to accept. Do you ever wonder what else you might have been? Every single day, Emma admitted. And then I look at that sign and I watch someone come in exhausted and leave a little less exhausted, and I think there are worse things to inherit than that. The following week, Daniel arrived soaking wet from a rainstorm that had come in without warning, the way storms sometimes do in the fall. His jacket plastered to his shirt, water running off his hair onto the welcome mat. What happened to you? Emma said, coming around the counter, already reaching for the thick dish towel she kept near the back. I forgot my umbrella, Daniel said, dripping. And I didn't want to skip today, so I just ran the 2 blocks. Are you out of your mind? She said, toweling off his hair with an efficiency that surprised both of them, with how natural it felt. Probably, he said, smiling despite the cold. But the alternative was not coming. Sit by the radiator, she said, steering him toward the table closest to the back wall, where the old cast-iron register hummed warmest. Before you catch something and I have to feel responsible. She brought him a blanket from the storage room, a soft gray one she kept for the cold months when the old building let the draft in. You keep blankets at a coffee shop? He asked, wrapping it around his shoulders. For normal customers, no, she said. For customers who run through rainstorms just to show up, I make exceptions. So I'm a special case. You were a special case from the first week, she said, and then immediately looked away because she had not meant to say that out loud quite so directly. Daniel looked at her with something open and unguarded in his expression. From the first week, he said. I thought you barely noticed me until the day you said something. I noticed you the first day you stopped out there, she said, gesturing toward the window, rain blurring the glass behind her. I just needed 3 months to work up to doing something about it. So really we were both slow. That makes me feel better, Daniel said. And a little worse, because it means I made you wait 3 months for no reason. The 3 months were worth it, Emma said, refilling his mug without being asked. Though I reserve the right to not say that again the next time you show up unprepared for the weather. Outside, the rain kept falling on the sidewalks and the storefronts and the old brick buildings of the neighborhood. Inside, wrapped in a borrowed blanket with warm coffee in both hands, Daniel thought he would not mind at all if the rain never quite stopped. A few days later, Daniel walked in with a young woman beside him, dark curly hair, bright eyes, looking around the coffee shop with the focused interest of someone who had heard a great deal about a place before finally visiting it. Emma, Daniel said with a kind of uncomplicated pride he did not bother to hide. This is my sister Sophie. She insisted on coming so many times I ran out of reasons to put it off. So you're the one from the coffee shop, Sophie said, studying Emma with a grin that was both warm and thoroughly evaluating. My brother has mentioned you approximately 400 times in the last month. I already knew about the apron. He told you about the apron? Emma asked, looking at Daniel. I told her a few things, Daniel admitted, going pink. He told me everything, Sophie said cheerfully. Sit down, Daniel, before you embarrass yourself any more than you already have. Is it true you had to literally call him out from the sidewalk? Sophie asked Emma. Completely true, Emma said. 3 months of this before I finally asked him directly whether he was coming in or just window shopping. I knew it, Sophie said, nodding like this confirmed a long-held theory. Back home in Ohio, the whole family is like this. Our mom took 4 years to tell our dad she liked him, and they worked in the same building. 4 years. 4 years, Emma repeated. 4 years, Sophie confirmed. It runs in the family, which is why I am very, very glad you did not have that kind of patience. The trouble arrived on a Thursday afternoon when Daniel's coworker Marcus appeared at his cubicle with the particular energy of someone who is about to ruin someone's day with genuinely good intentions. I've got a surprise for you, Marcus announced. I don't like your surprises, Daniel said, not looking up from his screen. This one you'll like, Marcus said. My wife has a friend. She's single, works at an accounting firm nearby. Great sense of humor. I showed her your photo. She's interested, and we're all going to dinner tonight. Tonight? Daniel said, finally looking up. Marcus, I can't tonight. Why not? You never have plans. Daniel did not know how to explain that his entire concept of having plans had reorganized itself around a coffee shop 2 blocks away, so he said vaguely, I have a commitment. What commitment? Marcus leaned in. Daniel, you haven't gone on a date since your last relationship ended. My wife has been after me about this for months. Please don't make me go home empty-handed. And because 6 years of habit weighed more than 2 weeks of new and still fragile certainty, Daniel heard himself say, Okay, what time? That afternoon, he walked to the coffee shop, feeling like someone had tied a small anchor to his chest. Emma noticed immediately. She always did. Something wrong? She asked, setting his mug down. Just work stuff, he said too quickly. You're a bad liar, she told him. Your forehead does this thing. He stayed less time than usual that day, made an excuse about a commitment, and left without meeting her eyes when he said goodbye. Emma watched him walk away faster than usual, not turning back even once to look through the window like he normally did. She stayed later than she needed to that evening, finding reasons to rearrange the pastry case, wipe down the already clean counters, check the till twice. Still here, her grandmother called from the kitchen, coat already on. Almost done, Emma said. He didn't come by his usual time, her grandmother observed, carrying out a small tray of things to put away. I noticed. He came, Emma said. He had somewhere to be. Her grandmother set the tray down on the counter and looked at her granddaughter with the directness that came from having known her since she was born. Em, she said carefully, I've watched you light up every time that young man walks through the door. And I'm not going to tell you that's wrong. But I also want you to remember that just because someone stands on your sidewalk for 3 months doesn't mean they owe you anything yet. I know that, Emma said, though her voice came out smaller than she intended. I know you know it, her grandmother said, reaching across the counter to squeeze her hand. I just want to make sure you're also being careful with yourself. Those are 2 different things. That sentence stayed with Emma through closing, through locking up, through the walk home in the cool night air. She told herself she was being ridiculous. 2 weeks was nothing. 3 months on a sidewalk could have been simple curiosity, a shy person who finally got comfortable, nothing more than that. She almost believed it. The next 2 days, Daniel did not come in at his usual time. Emma made the cinnamon coffee anyway both mornings, and both times she had to pour it out. On the 3rd day, Walter arrived at his usual table, took one look at the empty window seat, and raised his eyebrows at Emma across the room. The young man hasn't been in? He asked. Couple of days, Emma said, wiping a table that was already clean. 2 days is nothing, Walter said. My late wife made me wait 11 months before she agreed to a second date. 2 days is barely a pause. It's not the same, Emma said. With her, you knew where you stood. Did I? Walter said. I didn't know anything. I just kept showing up. That's all any of us can do. What Emma did not know was that those 2 days, Daniel had been using them to do something he had not done since he was very young. He went to Marcus directly and told him the truth. "I'm not going to a second dinner," Daniel said. "Why not?" Marcus asked. "She said she had a good time." "We both had a good time, as friends," Daniel said. "But there's someone else, Marcus. There's been someone else the whole time, and I should have said so from the beginning instead of going along with something I already knew wasn't going to be right." Marcus stared at him. "Who?" he asked. Daniel took a breath. "A woman named Emma," he said. "She runs the coffee shop down the block. I've been going in every day for 2 weeks, and before that I was walking past for 3 months trying to work up the nerve to actually go in." 3 months, Marcus said. 3 months, Daniel confirmed. Marcus was quiet for a moment. "Daniel," he said finally, "why didn't you just tell me this to begin with?" "Because I didn't know how to say it out loud," Daniel said. "I'm working on that." That same afternoon, Daniel walked the 2 blocks from his office to the corner cup, with his heart doing something more complicated than it had the first time he ever pushed that door open. Emma was behind the counter when he came in. Her expression was careful, the warmth still there underneath, but held at a certain distance. "Hi," he said, stopping in front of the counter instead of going to his table. "Hi," she said. "I need to tell you something," Daniel said, "before I talk myself out of it again." "Go ahead," she said, arms crossed but listening. "The other day when I left early," he said, "I had a dinner. A setup. A coworker arranged it without really asking me, and I agreed because I didn't know how to say no, which is the same problem that kept me on that sidewalk for 3 months, just pointed in the opposite direction." Emma was quiet. "I went," Daniel said, "and I sat there and thought about nothing except that I had rather be here. I told the other woman there was someone I was already thinking about. I was honest with her. And then I spent 2 days trying to figure out how to be honest with you." "You had the coffee ready," he said, "both days, didn't you?" "Both days," Emma said. "Poured it out both times." "I'm sorry," he said. "I should have told you the truth from the start, instead of leaving you with no explanation." "You should have," she agreed, though the edge in her voice had already started softening. "I also told my coworker today that there won't be a second dinner," Daniel said, "because I already found the person I wanted to spend time getting to know. She's 2 blocks from my office, and she makes the best coffee I've ever had in my life." Emma stood very still for a moment. "You said that out loud," she said, "in front of your coworker." "In front of my entire cubicle area," Daniel said. Turns out one of the accountants next to me was listening to the whole conversation. Something shifted in Emma's expression, the held-back warmth giving way to something more genuine. "I've spent a long time," Daniel said, "keeping quiet about things that mattered to me because I was scared of how it might land. I did it in high school, I did it at work, I did it on your sidewalk for 3 months. I don't want to keep doing that." Emma came out from behind the counter. This was something she almost never did during business hours. She stood in front of him with no counter between them for the first time since they had met. "You know what time it is?" she asked. "Almost 7, he said, glancing at the clock above the bar. "We close at 9, she said. "I know." "I have never," Emma said slowly, "closed this place before 9 o'clock. Not one day in the 5 years since I took it over from my grandmother. Not when I was sick, not when it snowed, not once." She walked to the door, reached up and turned the sign in the window from open to closed. "What are you doing?" Daniel asked. "It's still early. You'll miss customers." "I've been on this side of the counter every single day for 5 years," Emma said, walking past him toward the window table. "Every single day I've been the one who stands here and watches other people sit down, take a break, have a conversation, slow down. I'm always the one keeping things running, never the one who gets to stop." She sat down on the customer side of the table, Daniel's side. "Sit with me," she said, patting the chair across from her. "Over here. I want someone to bring me coffee for once." Her grandmother appeared from the back kitchen without being called, as if she had been listening for exactly this moment. carrying 2 mugs that had been steeping at the perfect temperature and set them both on the table. "On the house," her grandmother said softly, her eyes bright. "And I'll be in the back." She disappeared without another word. Daniel sat down. "What now?" he asked, wrapping both hands around the mug. "Just this," Emma said. "You and me and coffee that's not going to go cold, because nobody's in a hurry to go anywhere." "I like that plan," he said. "I've been watching couples meet in this coffee shop for years," Emma said after a moment. "People on first dates, people in old relationships, people making up after arguments. All of it happening right in front of me while I kept the place running. And I never thought I'd be on this side of it," she said, sitting down. "Letting someone else worry about whether the coffee's the right temperature?" "Is it?" Daniel asked. She took a sip. "Perfect," she said. Outside, the neighborhood moved along without them for a while. Inside, with the close sign facing the street and 2 cups of coffee between them, Emma and Daniel sat at the window table and talked until the streetlights came on. The next morning, Walter was the first customer through the door, as always. He stopped when he saw Daniel already there with 2 cups at the table, Emma sitting across from him instead of behind the counter. "Well," Walter said, pointing at the scene with his folded newspaper, "does this mean what I think it means?" "We're together," Daniel said, "if that's what you're asking." "About time," Walter said, pulling out his regular chair with a small shake of his head. "I'm going to need someone to organize a new round of bets because I do not have the energy at my age to keep track of the rest of this on my own." "What's there left to bet on?" Daniel asked. "How long before you ask her to dinner somewhere that isn't a coffee shop?" Walter said. "I give it 2 weeks." "1 week," said Ruth, who had just walked in and immediately caught up with the conversation. "1 week," Daniel said, looking at Emma across the table with a certainty he would not have recognized in himself 3 months ago. "Maybe less." Emma stood up to go get Walter his usual, pausing just long enough to squeeze Daniel's shoulder as she passed. "Don't let him talk you into any more bets," she said. "Too late," Walter said pleasantly. "I already owe him $50 from the first one." Sophie arrived at noon unannounced with a box of pastries from the Ohio-style bakery she had discovered 2 neighborhoods over. "I had to see it with my own eyes," she announced, setting the box on the counter. "My brother called me this morning sounding like an entirely different person." "It's real," Emma confirmed, pouring Sophie a cup without being asked. "I can't believe he actually did it," Sophie said, looking at her brother with something between pride and disbelief. 3 months on a sidewalk, and then boom. "It took some encouragement," Emma said. "He needed it," Sophie said. "The whole family is like this. We love deeply and we move extremely slowly. You're going to need a lot of patience." "I've already got some practice in that department," Emma said, glancing toward the window. Outside, the sun was sitting on the tops of the buildings, the way it does in early autumn, warm and slanted, and in no particular hurry. Inside the corner cup, with the coffee still on and the door propped open to let in the afternoon air, 2 people who had taken the long way around to find each other sat at a table by the window, with no particular reason to be anywhere else. "And how about you, on a scale of 0 to 10? How much did this coffee shop love story make you smile? Tell me down here if you've ever been the one standing on the sidewalk, waiting to find the nerve to walk through the door."